Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Welcome to another week of the Bad Website Club Web Development Bootcamp. I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. I had a very chill weekend myself, but I'm so excited to be back here and talk about typography. So, before we get started, I want to check in as always. Last time we met, we did Flexbox, and it was a lot, and it was probably a lot to take in at once. I just want to check in. How are we feeling? How are we feeling so far with learning HTML and CSS? Have you continued your learning journey accordingly? And yeah, just how's our spirits? In the meantime, if you're tuning in for the first time, hi, I'm Carmen. Eda, Jess, and myself are running this free web development bootcamp in collaboration with Free Code Camp. And if you're wondering if you are too late, no, you are not. Everything here is self-paced. Everything here is recorded. So if you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@badwebsiteclub, you'll find everything recorded there, including a playlist that is up to date for this bootcamp. You can join us on Discord if you go to this link here. I'm going to quickly make it go away so that I can edit it and then paste it in here. Yeah, that's the Free Code Camp Discord channel. If you go to the Bootcamp discussion channel, you'll find everything there. And I encourage you to ask questions and answer questions there. I know I keep saying this, but no better way to learn than by teaching. Trust me. You'll find the bootcamp schedule here. If you go to badwebsite.club/bootcamps/spring-2026. And finally, by joining this bootcamp, by even being in the chat today, you are agreeing to abide by our code of conduct. So if you go to badwebsite.club/code-of-conduct, you'll find it there. In summary, what we're asking for is that you be constructive and you be exemplary of what you would expect somebody to treat you. So if you see anything out of sorts, please let us know. Mel has so many questions. I'm excited. Well, tell you what, Mel, write the questions into the chat. I will bookmark them. And if we have time at the end, I'll try to get through as many of them as possible. Oh, Lucy says, when I started going through the projects with Flexbox, it started making a lot more sense. That is so cool. Congrats. I'm a big believer in that. Once you start applying stuff and getting familiar with it, you'll understand it a lot better. Remember, understanding is not quite the same as like having a full grasp of how it relates to the building blocks of the universe. We'll number them for you. Mel, you can also post them on Discord. You don't have to wait for us to be live for you to ask questions. Just FYI, definitely post them. But that said, wait, nice little rodent behind me on the rodent pad. There's a rodent behind me? Rodent? Mel doesn't do Discord. Fair enough. I don't see a rodent. If you're talking about a... Sorry. Let's get to the things. Let's get into typography, shall we? Now, if you're not familiar with it, typography is the science, the art of fonts, letters, words. I'm in the mouse. Fair enough. Yeah, sorry. how text is displayed. And we're going to get into what is the essentials of what fonts are first. What are the fundamentals of typography? And you might be familiar with it because you read a lot of words on the internet, on your screen, on books and newspapers, magazines. So we'll start with typefaces, which is an overall look of a font, right? We know fonts. We pick a font from a drop-down when writing documents, or we set our fonts when working with our UX design. And here we're going to be doing a bunch of fonts in CSS. So two very important typefaces that we'll see are the serif fonts, which are fonts with little, can I call them notches? I'm going to call them notches. Nobody can stop me. Little notches on the letters. If you look here, we have this hello world where the H has a bunch of notches on it. The E has a little fancy little bit at the end. The L has these notches coming out of it. These are serifs, right? Yes, I know they're called serifs. Thank you. So these are serifs, right? And the thing about, and you'll see a lot of serif fonts in print media, books. I've got an instruction manual here. Let me take a look. It's in Italian. That's not very helpful. But yes, a lot of print media tends to use, not very helpful for me, by the way. I don't speak Italian. A lot of print media uses serif fonts for long form text, books, magazine articles, that sort of thing. Feats is extremely cute. So sans serif fonts are fonts. The French word sans means without serifs. And you'll see that they're, I don't want to use the word simplified, but the letters don't have these. Okay, there's a bit of a discussion as to, oh my goodness, okay. There's a bit of a discussion as to what to call these things. I'm going to stick with notches just for consistency's sake, or serifs. You'll see that the font here does not have these serifs. And you'll see a lot of websites and day-to-day apps use these. Another type of typeface are going to be, another type of typeface is going to be code fonts. Oh gosh, what's a popular coding font? Mel, I am bookmarking your questions as we go. Don't worry. I don't know an example of a coding font. Roboto, I think. No. Maybe Roboto is? No, I think Roboto is one. Eluado says, apparently non-serifed fonts can be a bit easier for dyslexic people, but that's also not universal as with anything else accessibility-wise. Indeed, but there are, and you should definitely look them up. You should definitely look them up. There are fonts that are specially designed for people with dyslexia, which is really interesting. Anywho, I'm going to go through these properties of fonts that are more relevant to our day-to-day work with CSS. So the weight of a font is going to describe the thickness of the characters. You might know bold, for example. Bold is a very common thicker weight. In CSS, this is applied with a number that it goes up in increments of 100. So the bigger the number, the thicker the lines of the letters. The style is going to dictate how it's tilted, the slant of the characters. You might know italics, very common way of styling your font. And the width of characters is going to dictate how much horizontal space those individual characters or letters are going to take up. So next, we're going to look at some more properties of typography. There's the baseline, which is where, think of it as like the little perch on the bench where the letters sit. Letters like P and Y have little dangly legs that they will leave. The cap height is the height of capital letters. We'll see, like here, the cap height of our font is this much for the letter H. The X height is the average height of lowercase letters. It leaves out what's below the baseline and what's above, like the principal part of the letter that usually goes up into capital letters. Usually excludes ascenders and descenders, right? So ascenders are those top parts I was telling you about. Letters like H, B, D, F all have ascenders. And descenders are the lower dangly legs I was telling you about. I think that's a better technical term, I suppose. That includes letters like H, Y, G, P, and Q. Some more advanced concepts. We've got kerning, which is how the space between specific pairs of characters are laid out. So we're here, for example, reducing the space between A and V. I want to get back to this in a minute. You can see here different examples of kerning, which is that horizontal space between characters. This is a lower kerning, a higher kerning. We've then got tracking. That's how much space, how much distance there is between those characters. Then we've got leading, which is that vertical space between lines. If you remember, we were already working with line height in CSS. That's what this is known as in typography. Now, I don't want to be a naysayer. Being familiar with these concepts is essential for choosing the right font for your project. Absolutely true. I'm just going to tell you this from a personal perspective. In my work as a software engineer, I have never thought of these things, right? By which I mean, I know the term kerning, and I know that I see that in the chat, a couple folks are making fun of making jokes about kerning. And of course, absolutely leave the default values for all of these as much as possible, because we're also familiar with these on a day-to-day basis. And sure, if we're messing with things like kerning and leading and all of that, it is going to impact how we read it. However, I would recommend leaving that to the typography experts. That said, taking things into account, such as the density of the text versus the line height, super important. And by implementing some of the typography essentials that we'll be discussing today, we can actually use typography to our advantage and help us make our content or website more intuitive to follow. Remember, fonts should not be something that you're constantly thinking about. It should just flow, right? Of course, design choices can be made to communicate something. But if we think about this on a day-to-day basis, the primarily function of text is to be read. How are you doing so far? People have opinions. I love it. So let's go through the Q&A. Which of the following refers to how the individual characters are designed and arranged? Glyphs, types, beaks, or shoulders? Just FYI, Mel, I bookmarked all of your questions here, so we'll get through them as much as possible. People are saying type, thank you. What is the difference between a typeface and a font? A typeface is a specific style of a font, while a font is the overall design. A font is a specific style of a typeface, while a typeface is the overall design. There is no difference between a typeface and a font. A typeface is a collection of fonts, while a font is a single character. These are confusing questions. Answers, sorry. What do we think? People are saying it's the second one. A font is a specific style of a typeface, while a typeface is the overall design. What is the main difference between serif and sans serif fonts? Serif fonts are handwritten, while sans serif fonts are printed. Serif fonts have small lines at the end of characters, while sans serif fonts do not. Serif fonts are used for headlines, while sans serif fonts are used for body text. And serif fonts are older than sans serif fonts. 2, hats and feet. Thank you. And that's it. All of our answers are correct. So we'll pat ourselves on the back. Pat, pat. And we will move on to the next topic. I'm going to try to get through this as quick as possible, but also, oh gosh, it's getting dark here. Give me 1 second, everybody. That's better. Yes. Let's go through best practices for working with typography. And the funny thing you're going to realize is that a lot of this is already kind of implemented by your browser. You know, when you write HTML and you don't apply any styles to it, the headings look really big, progressively smaller as they go down, as they go up. Let me try that again. They get progressively smaller as you go through H1, H2, H3, and so on and so forth. Another thing to bear in mind that is already implemented by browsers by default is that text should be large enough for you to be able to read it. The hierarchy is important. Having a consistent font across your whole website is important as well. For example, and I love when people do this, you can have a style guide. This is what Free Code Camp does. They have a primary monospace font, a primary proportional font in longer sections of text, and they use Sax Mono as the font of our logo. And you're going to see that generally the suggestion to limit the amount of fonts you use on a website to 2 or 3. I myself on my website use 2 font families. One is I use for like headings and that sort of thing, and the other one is for text. Another best practice is to use that white space to create white space to have a balance between the amount of text. And as always, use tools to automate how accessible your website is. You might be tempted to set the font sizes of your website to be absolute values, 14 pixels, 16 pixels, and so on and so forth. The problem with that is that not everybody wants to use the same font size. On your phones, you can set the size of the font. This is not just for websites, huh? This is for apps as well. Your operating system. When on your computer, you have different resolutions. So making your font sizes relative, responsive, but still making it so that your website can respond to that is going to be really important. Let's do some Q&A. Which of the following is a very important factor for ensuring readability in web typography? Using a large variety of fonts, maximizing font size for all text elements, achieving optimal contrast between text and background, or aligning to the left margin. What do we think? Optimal contrast. I agree. Thank you. When choosing fonts for a website, it's generally recommended to use as many fonts as possible for visual interest, limit the number of font families to improve consistency, prioritize decorative fonts over readability, use only serifed fonts for body text. That's right. Limit the number of font families. It can also, like, depending on the font, be quite overwhelming to have a lot of fonts. Which of the following best describes the concept of visual hierarchy in typography? Using only one font style throughout a design, prioritizing the most important information through font size and style, maintaining consistent spacing between letters, or ensuring all text is centered on the page. You can actually use the power of typography to lead how your users should read content. Prioritizing the most important information through font size and style. Yes, thank you. Pat, pat. Let's move on. So next, we're going to be talking about font families. And font families is something you're going to see more of in CSS. We're going to see how we're declaring a bunch of font families and also how we're creating our own. So in essence, font family, group of fonts. They have a similar style for their typeface. But they can also have variations in their style, weight, and width. It's important to think of font families as a collection that you wield on your website for an intended purpose. Let's look at this example with Arial. Arial is a font family that includes variants like Arial Bold and Arial Italic. Now let's look at how to actually use those font families. In our example here, we have a P with Arial font and a P with no styling, with no ID, pardon me. So for our Arial font paragraph, we're setting the font family to be Arial, and we can see the difference here. One thing to note, Arial is sans serif. Oh, Mel, your question is good. Is it rude to have multiple custom fonts on a web page since it would use browsing data? Define rude. So beyond human emotion, let's put it bluntly. Every custom font will require a download, right? The more you download, the slower your website loads. Nothing about the user's resources. I know, I'm being facetious. Bear with me. So, right, more downloads, the slower it is to load. Sure, it's fast at home on a wired connection, but if you're in an area using a, what are they called? Service phone? No, what are they called? Not a smartphone, but I think they're called service phones. In any case, like an older flip phone, you know, that is going to load significantly slower. If you like I would consider that rude, but to each their own. I'll share something a little personal. I'm neurodivergent. I get overwhelmed by a lot of fonts. It can, especially if I have to like process a lot of different like serifs, non-serifs, and then there's like symbols that are a little harder to read, or if there's a lot of like, if you have like an entire body of text written in cursive, it's gonna give me a headache. So I like to stick with conventions, conventional fonts. I guess. Is it rude? I don't know. Is it rude to not want people to read your stuff? I'd say maybe yes. How do you choose typography based on a desired mood or a theme? Gosh, you know what the problem is? It's very subjective to pick fonts. Like on my website, I have like a fancy font. I've actually gotten feedback to maybe change it. I'm still thinking about it, looking for alternatives. I'm not a typography expert, so I can't really answer that for you because it's, like I said, very subjective. But going to the previous lesson, I really think you should stick to that as a convention. Go with the best practices. That is, minimize the amount of custom fonts, and maybe do like 2 or 3 fonts max. Have a style guide, be consistent. Because Mel said something here. Maybe this is why banks and government sites are boring using Arial. I mean, define boring. It's consistent. Anyway, this is what I want to talk about next because I think this is really important. A font family can have more or one font specified, right? That's why it's called a font family. And this is fantastic because what it allows you to do is have fallbacks. So what are fallbacks? This font family, for example, specifies Arial, comma, Lato. Lato? I'm going with Lato. If for any reason I load this website on a computer that does not have Arial installed, my computer, my browser will then try to apply the font Lato, right? This is what a fallback is. It's like, well, Arial doesn't exist, let's go with Lato. Furthermore, there's also what are called generic font families. And you're definitely going to want to have some of these. So if in case you don't have Arial, you don't have Lato, you can tell the browser, you know what, just use whatever sans serif font you have installed. And you might be wondering, well, how does it decide? That is up to the discretion of the browser/operating system developer. Let me take a second and show you what the font family is for my website. I mean, I'm not going to open my website. I'm just going to copy paste that font family. No, monospace is a font family. Font size, font family. Where's my font family? Yeah. Where is it? Bear with me, folks. I love stuff like this. Yes, check this out. So here's the font family for regular text I have, set up on my website. So font family, Sego UI, that is, I think, a Windows one. Then there's Apple System, an older Mac one, Roboto, Ubuntu, Droid Sans, Helvetica Neue. I think that's from the early 2010s of Mac OS, sans serif, and at the very end, Apple color emoji. Not sure about why I have that last one, but you can see how big font families can get. So the reason we have this, as I said, to have fallbacks. Let's say, for example, we're going to see today that you can also specify and tell CSS to download a website, a font. But if it doesn't manage to download it, then it can have a fallback. Mel saying, what's Ubuntu like? The font? It's a font. It's sans serif. It's very nice. The operating system? It's Linux. I like Linux. They're currently pivoting to be what they call an agentic operating system. So depending on how you feel about that, that's a thing. But I'm not here to share opinions, because my mother told me if I have nothing nice to say, I shouldn't say anything. Anywho, what is the primary purpose of the font family CSS property? To set the color of the text, control the font size of the text, define the typeface used for the text, or to adjust the line spacing of the text. In the meantime, I want to read this from Eduardo. Apple still doesn't allow you to change the macOS system font. You can force it partially through some third-party tools. Whoa, I did not know that. But I've never tried. But please, not every... thank you, Lucy. Okay, so next question. Which of the following is a common generic font family? Helvetica, Times New Roman, sans serif, Arial. What do we think? Thank you, sans serif. So, how can you specify multiple font families as a fallback in CSS? By separating them with commas, by using nested font family declarations, by using the ampersand character, by using the pipe character. Did you know that character is called pipe? I will dork out a little. It's I don't exactly know why it's called pipe, but I do know it gets used in a lot of Linux and Unix systems to pipe the output from one command into another. If you have no idea what I'm saying, don't worry. I rarely do either. No, I'm joking. It's for fancy commands, terminal commands that feed into each other. So people are saying number one. Thank you. Let's check our answers. Looks good. Pat, pat. We're making good progress, but we still got to keep going. So next we're going to be talking about web-safe fonts. So web-safe fonts are generally ones that you're going to see commonly across different browsers and operating systems, and their purpose is to just be sort of like the very, very end of the line fallback, right? Operating systems comes with blah, blah. Operating systems come with fonts installed, and as Eduardo was saying earlier, you can also set the font, the base font for your operating system in some cases, in others not. And what's important to note about web-safe fonts is that they are, let's say, as consistent as possible. By the way, not all fonts are free. I hope you know that. They take a lot of design, a lot of work. Some are open source, some are not. So when we talk about web safe fonts, we're talking about the fallback ones that are like as open and as available as possible. We've actually worked with a couple of these already. We've seen fonts like Arial, Verdana, Trebuchet. These are common web safe fonts. But those are sans serif. Some examples of web safe serifed fonts are ones like Hello World, Georgia. Are those the only two? There's got to be more. I'm sure there are. What kind of licenses are common on fonts? So if you're not familiar, licenses are agreements, usually in the form of text, that are handed out to specify how you should be going about using a piece of software. And fonts are kind of like pieces of software. They have copyrights just like images do. So common licenses for fonts, I'm not sure. I guess it depends on who you ask. If you ask Adobe, it's probably going to be way too much money. Okay, so this is interesting. The most common license for open source font is the SIL Open Font License, or OFL. That's a good question. Thank you. So, which of the following is a key characteristic of web-safe fonts? They're difficult to read, designed for specific types of content, they're widely supported across different platforms and browsers, and they're only available in serif styles. What do we think? Thank you. We're saying they are widely supported across different platforms and browsers. Which of the following is not a web-safe font? Arial, Verdana, Georgia, or Dancing Script? While y'all answer that, let's look at Mel's question. If you pay for a font that lets you use it in a commercial website, can a creator change the license and say you can't use the font if you make money? Hi, I disappeared for a second. I'm so sorry. I hit back on my browser by accident. I'm sorry. I just thought it'd be fun to disappear for a second, I guess. Let's go back to Mel's question. Can a creator, yeah, I guess I didn't like that question. I was like, oh no, I'm just gonna nope out of here. So what I wanted to say before I hit back on my browser was, I'm not a lawyer. So don't take this as legal advice. If the license changes, you need to conform with that license. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Like Cesium says, it's probably a regional legal question, and it depends. Like it probably depends on the jurisdiction the creator lives in. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't mess with messy like legal stuff. Just make sure you're up to date on the license, and remember, the version of the font is attached to that version of the license. The license. Let me put it this way: the license is attached to that version of the font you're using. I don't think you can change the license attached to that version, but again, not a lawyer. So when are web safe fonts particularly useful? For complex and visually demanding web designs, when a specific custom font is essential for branding purposes, for basic web design, and when consistent rendering is a priority, or for creating custom fonts. In the meantime, I'm going to read this follow-up and not hit the back button this time. My hands are off the mice. So the license you buy, the font on stays, but if you update, the new license applies. Again, not a lawyer, but most likely. I think the license should say that it can change. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not very helpful when it comes to licensing stuff. So people are saying when a specific custom font is essential for branding purposes. So let's check our answers. And no. So think about the situations where a reliable and universally supported font is needed. So when are website fonts particularly useful? Let's take another look. For complex and visually demanding web designs, for basic web design, and when consistent rendering is a priority. So we'll click on that. People are saying number 3. And let's see. There we go. Well done, everybody. Pat, pat. Now, we will next be looking at our first at rule in CSS. And unlike most CSS instructions which interact with a CSS engine, the at rule is interacting directly with a browser. We're doing things like media queries, keyframes, and in this case, a font face, right? So when we want to use at rules, remember we're interacting directly with the browser itself, as opposed to the CSS engine, which is part of the browser, but I hope that's clear. So at rules don't look too different from what you do on a day-to-day basis with CSS. You have the rule itself, and then in curly brackets, you've got your descriptors for, in this case, a font face. So when we want to oh, Mel, the ad rules feel a lot like programming. I have exciting news. Actually, all of CSS is programming. I am very adamant about this. I'm being cheeky. Don't mind me. So first thing we're going to do when we're defining our own font face is we give it a name. The font family is called, in this case, my custom font. And what's useful about that is that we can, once we've done this, we can already declare that font family wherever we want to use that font family. Now, bear in mind, it's in quote marks. When we're defining our own custom fonts faces, we're using quote marks. Very important. But of course, we need a font file, right? And this is where the whole downloading font stuff gets tricky, to put it mildly. So let's take a look here. We've got our font family set to my custom font, and then a source, and 3 URLs. You might be wondering, but I only need 1 font file, don't I? And to that I answer, when you download a custom font, you're going to find that it comes with a lot of files, because these can vary on how they're used in different operating systems, in different browsers, in different types of devices, right? Because like on a phone, it's probably going to be different from a computer or a fridge, and so on and so forth. Ooh, Mel is saying you can use local to use a font if it's already on the device. Which device, Mel? The server or the client? To be clear, is it on the device being where the HTML file is, the CSS is, or the device that you're using to look at it? People, and they're saying client. Cool. So the device you're looking at it with. That's interesting. I didn't know that. So these are the different types of font formats. Collection, never seen it. Embedded for OpenType, SVG, TrueType, WAF and WAF2. So you're going to see a lot of that. And WAF is going to be the most common one you see. There's WAF, Web Open Font Format. There's also a second version to compress that data. So yeah, and you're going to see this often with a lot of font files for the same font. You can also specify the technology of that font. Very important. So yeah, let's go through the Q&A. What's the primary purpose of the font face at rule in CSS? People are saying number 3, to define custom fonts. Which of the following properties is required within the @font face rule to specify the font file or font files? Font name, SRC, font weight, or font style? People are saying number 2 for the source. That's right. Thank you. And what is the primary advantage of using custom fonts defined with @font face compared to relying solely on web-safe fonts? Increased browser compatibility, enhanced customization and branding options, faster page loading times, and simplified font management. Oh gosh, y'all are so fast. Yeah, enhanced customization and branding options. Check our answers. Looks good. Pat, pat. And now we'll move on to external fonts. As said, you can have fonts that you provide on your server or where your website is for people to download them. Or there are services out there like Google Fonts and Font Squirrel. I'll admit I hadn't heard of Font Squirrel before this bootcamp, to provide an online version of those fonts that you can just incorporate into your website directly. Let's take a look at Google Fonts first. And I'm going to do that myself here. Give me a second, everybody. Yeah, cool. Let's zoom in. I hope everybody can see that okay. Cool. We can see that there are 1,396 fonts here. Oh, Mel saying, most of the time CSS feels like writing a JSON file, less like programming. So I will once again argue with you, because what you're talking about is the difference between declarative and procedural programming. Declarative programming is still programming. Besides, yes, most of the time when you're writing CSS, you are declaring rules, but you can use CSS to do things like arithmetic. Don't recommend it, but you can. Some of the most widely used programming languages are declarative, like Erlang, for example. Erlang? I think it's Erlang. Anyway, yes, custom fonts, 1,936. Look at all these fonts. Different font. What's the difference between declarative and procedural? I thought they were the same. I will bookmark that. So let's say you're looking through all of the fonts. Let's say you find Google Sans. You're a fan of Google Sans. Wait, what? Oh, they have tags. That's cool. We can see what it looks like and mess around with it, optical size. We can see what it looks like aligned in different ways, mess with the font weight, and so on and so forth. And when you're ready, you can click on Get Font. And there's two ways to get that font. One is to get embed code, and the other one's to download it. Did not know you could connect to a database in CSS. That's pretty cool. So if you download it, you get the font file, and you can incorporate it into your website using the font face at rule. However, you can also get embed code. Here's how it looks. This is fancy. Anyway, you specify what platform: web, Android, iOS, or Flutter, which is Google's mobile development platform. So anyway, you get access to some CSS files, some pre-connect stuff, and then where is display.swap? Where is it? I want to see it. Copy code. Hang on a sec, because this is important. HTML editor. Take a look. Aha! So, CSS, let me copy this URL and take a look. What you get is a bunch of font face declarations. You can see where they are, and there's our WAF files. This is more if you're curious as to what's lying underneath. But yeah, you can get access to those WAF files that way, and that's how you can embed the custom font into your website without having to write your own font faces. Sorry, we are running out of time, and I'm just blabbling about CSS. So we'll look at Font Squirrel next, which similarly, you can download font files. Thank you for the link. You can see examples of the variations and download a font face kit, which includes those font face declarations we were talking about before. Hand on my heart, never used this before. But yeah, helpful stuff. So let's go through the Q&A, and I'm going to go a little bit faster now. What is the primary advantage of using external fonts from services like Font Squirrel or Google Fonts? Reduce font file size, increase font rendering speed, expanded font selection and variety, improved browser compatibility. Expanded font selection. Thank you. What is the potential drawback of using multiple external font? Increase website load time, increased likelihood of bugs, limited customization options, or increased browser compatibility? Increased load time, that's right. And what is the importance of providing fallback fonts when using external fonts? To create a more visually appealing design, to improve font rendering performance, to display the text correctly even if the external font is not loaded properly, or to reduce file size. What do we think? So, number 3. Very good. Pat. I can tell you what there's a privacy-focused open source font resource called Bunny Fonts. Thank you, Etta. That looks awesome. Just a minor thing. So I use a Google font on my website, one Google font. I downloaded it and I provide it, I specify it as a font face. So I downloaded it and I put it into my server because I feel it's important that if you're going to load everything, it might as well be from one place. My primary concern is that as these big companies start using more and more AI coding, we've seen a lot of failures of these companies. I believe Amazon has had like several outages this year, and the culprit of that is tending to be AI coding. So if you can host it and you're allowed to, maybe host it yourself. Anyway, last one, and then we got to go. So, text shadow. I know some of y'all are going to be excited for this, and we talked about shadows for text before, so we're just going to breeze through this. When you have a piece of text, you can specify the text shadow property, and you can use two values here, the X and Y offset. That is how many pixels away from the text itself your font shadow should be. What does that mean? If I use 0 pixels, 0 pixels, we're not going to see anything because the font is on, the text is on top of the font. The further away it is, the more shadow there is. The more visible the shadow is. Or let's say, the less covered by the original text the shadow is. We can specify a color as well. So offset and color for the text. Font, shadow. So here we're specifying what looks like a turquoise cyan thing. Is my blue your blue? I don't know. So yeah, we can specify a color. We can specify these values in any order we want. I like to put the offset first. Do they show the blur? Oh yeah, the offsets can have negative values. So if you want to have the shadow be up and to the left, use negative values for that. And yes, we do specify the blur. So there's a third value. So X offset, Y offset, and blur radius. Remember we were doing that the other day when we were talking about filters in CSS? The bigger the blur radius, the fuzzier the text looks. Hold on. Okay, you can barely see it now. Let me make it black. Yeah, see? What is that? There we go. 10 pixels. Nice and fuzzy. And I'll admit I did not know this. You can specify multiple shadows. So by having comma separated offsets and blurs and colors, you can have lots of shadows. Don't know why you would, but you can. Mel just told us why. I made a rainbow using 7 text shadows with a lot of blur. That sounds amazing. I want to see it. It's a shame you're not on Discord. I'd love to see it. An example. Okay, so what is the primary purpose of the text shadow CSS property? To adjust the font size, to change the color, to create a shadow effect for the text, or to control the spacing between lines of text? What do we think? Thank you. How can you create a black text shadow with a horizontal offset to the right and a blur radius of 5 pixels? I'm not going to read these out. Thank you. So, how can you create multiple layered text shadow effects? By defining multiple shadows in the text shadow property, by nesting elements within each other, by using the filter property, or by applying a background image. And people are saying it's the first one. Thank you. Check our answers. They pass. Pat. Oh gosh, folks, we made it right on time. That is typography. Tomorrow, less reading. We will be looking at accessibilities for checking color contrast and hiding content so it doesn't become inaccessible. But before we go, I haven't forgotten, we have a few questions from Mel. Number one, ChatGPT says line height calculates from the baseline, distributing space above and below the baseline. Does this mean that if you do line height 0, the text will write multiple lines over each other? Good question. Let's find out. I will give a word of advice, and this is not because I have some kind of agenda with AI. However, I would trust the documentation over AI at any time. And yeah, AI is often confidently wrong. Text 1 and oh gosh, I cannot type today. Text 2. So we're saying that, hang on, I need to remove all of these styles. Fabulous. So P line height 0. Well, apparently not. Let's take a look at what's going on here. So the line height is 0. Can I inspect the P elements? Aha. Yes, the line height is 0. However, each P element has a margin. So what do? Let's remove the margin. Margin 0. Well, Mel, that answered our question. So yes, if you set the line height to 0, it will write multiple lines over each other. It's a good question. So what if you write a lot of text in one, so it moves to another line? I'm guessing it's the same thing, but let's find out. So I still wouldn't rely on AI too much. There you go. That looks gnarly. That looks cursed. I love it. Great question. Thank you. Does subscript and superior script calculate their position from the baseline or from the ascender/descender lines? I don't know. Let's find out. Does subscript or subscript calculate their position from the baseline or... Yeah, let's stick with that for now. How do you do subscript in HTML? Let me look that up real quick. Oh, sup and sub. Okay. So let's hide this. Sub. Sup. Now oh, looks like I can't type. Now I believe this might have to do with both the font itself and the default styling of the browser, because sub, vertical align sub, font size smaller. Vertical align sub. So it's based on the font. So calculate their position for the baseline or from the ascenders to descender lines. That's going to depend on your font, I believe. Don't quote me on this. I hope that's helpful. Vertical line has middle, sub, and baseline that are all slightly different heights. Actually, let's go back to your previous question. Is the margin and line height altering the position? Let's find out. Oh. Nope. Line height 2000 pixels. I didn't think this through very well. But no, it does not. Good question. So vertical align has middle, sub, and baseline that are all slightly different heights. Does the font define where those lines are, with some fonts having the distance between middle and baseline closer? Yes, it comes down to the font. These are great questions and makes me realize how little I know about typography. Does each letter in a font have its own width, height, and spacing defined in a struct or object to help calculate kerning? Oh, pal, I have no idea. I believe so. There are tools on the internet that let you like make your own font based on like drawing. I really don't know. I think this comes down to more of a font programming deal. These are great questions. Is it good practice to use SVGs and images for elements with brand identity containing text in case the device doesn't have the font? Is it good practice? Let me look it up real quick. So, is it good practice to use SVGs and images for elements with brand identity containing text in case the device doesn't have the font? Well, if the device doesn't have the font, you can specify it as an external font. However, if you're a big company and you're weird about copyright, that might be an issue. However, if a logo is meant to be a logo and recognized as an image, like you're saying here, FreeCodeCamp uses an SVG, even if it's the words FreeCodeCamp, because it's still a logo. So, and you don't want it to be read by a screen reader. You want it to be read by a screen reader as FreeCodeCamp logo. Is font face similar to a switch statement, with each line being like a case to try? If it succeeds, it breaks out of the source block. Yeah, I would say so. Just like with the font family, it's fallbacks. It's all fallbacks. Why do URL and format functions need quoted strings and not tech? Is tech taking a predefined global variable from the browser? I'm so glad you're asking this because Mel, I was preparing for you today because I was expecting somebody to come at me about that tech declaration. Where is it? Yes. And you're going to be disappointed in me. I couldn't for the life of me find out what on earth this tech thing is for. It looks like a screen rendering thing, like, you know, how like cathode ray tube monitors might do. This is extremely uneducated guessing I'm making. So let's go back to your question. Let's go back to your question at face value. Why is tech not doing quote marks? I believe it's that it is a predefined value on the browser, like you said. But this is a guess. Could not, like, I looked on MDN and I couldn't for the life of me find an answer to this. I'm sorry. Last question. What is the difference between declarative and procedural? I thought they were the same. So, as they say in German, jein, a mixture of ja and nein, yes and no. They're not the same thing. Declarative programming says what needs to be achieved without actually specifying how to do it, whereas procedural programming specifies each and every stinking step. So CSS, Prolog, to a lesser extent Elixir, these are all declarative programming languages wherein you specify what happens. Whereas procedural programming languages goes line by line. I like to think of it as kind of like the difference between a reference book and a novel. Not the best metaphor, but I hope that makes sense. Could tech be a legacy browser things only needed for edge cases? Don't know about legacy browser thing, but definitely for edge cases, because I'll be honest with you, my friend, I have never seen the tech thing until today. And I know this is annoying, but you've been exposed to it. I don't recommend trying to understand it. I'm going to be honest. I've seen it today, and by the time we next see each other, which I believe is Thursday, I will have promptly forgotten about it. I'm sorry. Anywho, gosh, I think, oh boy. Declarative is like, oh no, no. Declarative is like prompt engineering with AI. Do the thing. AI does it all, maybe in different ways each time. You know that meme with the guy who's like angry, like crossing his arms, and in the next panel, he's like, I guess. That's how I feel right now. Yeah, I guess so. Gosh, that's cursed. No, you're good. You're good. I love this. I'm gonna have trouble sleeping tonight. Anywho, I've kept this way over time, folks. Thank you for sticking around. So yeah, I think that covers everything for today. As I said, we'll be back tomorrow with accessibility. Yeah. Thanks everybody. It's been a joy as always, and take care, get lots of rest. Just let that learning stew, and see you next time. Bye for now.